Okay.
All right.
Okay. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome so much to another PHRC Lunch and Learn Forum. This one is the Philadelphia Regional Office edition, and we're so proud to have some of our new and emerging leaders coming to the stage today to present about Walter Wallace and the city of Philadelphia and that implication. And those presenters today are going to be Mr. Damon Green and Mr. Ariane Bethea. Before I bring you their bios, I'm going to bring to the stage our Executive Director, Mr. Tad Dion Lassiter, MSW, to bring us greetings from the Executive Director.
Yes, thank you so much. I want to say good afternoon and welcome to everyone who's going to be viewing this. I also want to say that Tamika and I and several others throughout our commission, we've done enough of these since March that we're always into workers, not necessarily numbers. We're always humbled and honored with those who participate, but we've done a number of these where we may have had maybe 12 people to over 300. And so for those who are tuning in, we want to thank you. In addition to that is one of the amazing things about technology is that you can keep it and you can actually import it and export it. So this Zoom will be recorded and we will be sharing it with multiple stakeholders. I want to also take the time to thank Damon Green and Ariane Bethea for not just creating a safe space, but creating a brave space for us to have a much needed but also long overdue conversation about not just the Walter Wallace Jr. situation in relation to the police, but also just the challenges that we see in our democracy as it pertains to state violence and Black bodies. It seems as if when we look at the landscape, we can say multiple names. It continues to be the reoccurring theme. Where on the white side of the color line, there are officers that take people like Dylan Ruth, Timothy McVeigh, Kyle Rittenhouse alive, and they should. On the Black side of the color line, when we're looking at people like Breonna Taylor, we're looking at Rashard Brooks, George Wallace, Walter Wallace, we lose our lives and we shouldn't. And so I want to just commend you two gentlemen for thinking it not robbery to say, hey, we're going to slow down the things that we do, albeit they're very important, but we're going to crystallize this moment and have a frank conversation. And so my heart goes out to the two of you, thanking you for that. And those of you who are watching this, please be mindful that if there is anything that comes to you where you have an aha moment, where you want to do something around xenophobia, transphobia, homophobia, reach out to me directly. Tamika and I, along with multiple others, we've been carrying the load since this moment. And I'll speak for myself. I'm experiencing racial fatigue, Zoom fatigue, vicarious traumatization, because we do this work, but a lot of us, we live in this body. Mr. Green is from Philadelphia. Mr. Bethea is from Philadelphia. I'm from Philadelphia. I can remember childhood memories of being harassed by the police, being traumatized by the police as well. So once again, want to thank the two of you for stepping into this brave space. I know it's going to be amazing. Want to thank those of you who are going to be present. And I'm just asking that all those who are participating be present with your spirit, because it really resonates and it really makes a difference. Want to thank Tamika, who also is just always just adding her intellectual property. And I want to just say publicly, Tamika, you and I, we're duplicating ourselves. And we're duplicating ourselves because a lot of times when you do this work, you need people to pour into you and not always be the persons pouring into one another. Mr. Green and Mr. Bethea, bless you and just thank you for what you're going to do today and what you continue to do in a leadership role in the Philadelphia Regional Office, and all the staff that's on this Zoom for the Philadelphia Regional Office and PHRC. Thank you for all the things that you do. If you celebrate the holidays, enjoy them and embrace them. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Executive Director Lassiter. And so at this time, I'd like to introduce these presenters who may be familiar to some of you and may be being introduced for the first time to some others. So we have Damon Green. Damon Green is a human relations representative with the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission and has been with us for almost 2 years. Damon has extensive experience in law enforcement in Philadelphia, working as a probation and parole officer. He has primarily worked in the YVRP, Youth Violence Reduction Partnership Unit, supervising high-risk offenders between the ages of 18 and 25 who are likely to become victims or perpetrators of violent crime. Damon is passionate about civil rights, social justice, and promotes the power of education to address and solve society's greatest challenges. Mr. Damon Green, give us a wave, Damon.
Good afternoon, guys. Glad to be here.
Thank you for giving you virtual hand clap.
And Merry Christmas to everyone. Happy
Thank
holidays.
you. And our second presenter is Mr. Ariane Bethea. Ariane was born and raised in Hartford, Connecticut, and is a husband and father of 2 extraordinary daughters. Graduate of Temple University with a political science degree, he is currently employed with the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission since 2000 in the Philadelphia Regional Office, and he serves as a senior human relations representative. In fact, I believe he is one of our most tenured out of the Philadelphia Regional Office. He has been a brother of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated since 1995. And so this year makes 25 years for Ariane.
Right.
Ariane gives of his time to community service activities, such as feeding community persons in West Philadelphia, working on cleaning and building projects and youth mentorship activities throughout the Philadelphia area, which is only natural due to scholarship and manly deeds, as is their motto.
That's right.
Ariane enjoys many sports activities such as basketball, running, and various physical fitness activities, and he enjoys studying history and politics. So this is Ariane Bethea. Give us a little wave, Ariane.
Hey, everybody. Philadelphia.
So gentlemen, before we get started with your presentation, and I load that on the screen, would you both just like to kind of just talk to us and give us an intro on how we came to the space today and the context of our discussion, and then we will go ahead and load the presentation and launch it to that.
Well, I'll start. So we came to this space as an agency, and an agency that's responsible for enforcing the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. You know, sometimes even in government institutions, we don't realize that our bodies of laws and statutes and all of that thing are living documents, or at least we have to work to make them living documents. And the Human Relations Commission right now, we have to go through a period of reexamination. And it takes management, it takes our working staff, investigators, clerical, and everyone involved to really have some self-awareness, saying that, you know what, we don't know it all, and we're not about it all in regards to eradicating discrimination, advocating, and fighting any of these different avenues. And so it just took some, a body of and talking to, all of us are part of this, the city and the community. And it just took us to say, hey, people talk to us each and every day about what's going on in our community. And I'm sure y'all get it just like I get it. People expecting us to have a voice, to have a say, to have some part in having did something, addressing some issues and problems in our local neighborhood. And for some time, we've been serving as the administrative capacity and doing complaints and answering complaints and all of that stuff. But we're not living, we're not expanding if that's all we see ourselves as doing. I know us as investigators talk about it all the time, and I know people come to y'all and talk about it all the time. Where are y'all? All this stuff is going on, where are y'all? So Damon and I took it upon ourselves, we have some encouragement through the executive director. I do appreciate that. I definitely want to say thank him to that, because it takes some courage for him. He has to wear hats of different people coming at him, whether it's through the commission, whether it's through management, whether it's through us investigators. Everybody's coming at him saying on how we think things should be done, how things should be changed. And he has to address it, answer it, respond to it, and come to it. And now you have, Damon and I come to him saying, listen, we need this done as well. So that's another thing. And so for him to open this up and say, okay, let me step to the side and just give y'all the support and resources to do this, I definitely want to say I appreciate and thank him. And also our regional director, Diana Metley, as well, because again, we have a lot of things going on in our agency and a lot of administrative things that take up our time and concern. But we're like, we cannot let that be all we're about. And so Damon and I have brought it together so we could bring this not only to our staff, but to other community persons and saying, what can we do? So, Damon.
Yeah, Ariane, you said it very well. And also 2020 has been a special year, as most people know. We've been dealing with a pandemic. We've been dealing with economic stress. And while the whole time all of this is going on, we've had protests, we have racial tension, and we also had, unfortunately, the shooting incident of Walter Wallace Jr., which happened right before the election. And we have to remember all of these events happened at the time of us having a contentious election in November. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share this information with everyone, to engage in a lively discussion, not only of what's going on, but what as we as members of our community and also as staff members of the PHRC, what can we do moving forward? Because as Ariane stated, people are looking to us to step in and to take a leadership role in the community, especially when it comes to matters of race and policing. So I'm just grateful for the opportunity to have this discussion. I know most of you are all on this call, and we had conversations before, very intelligent people, very thoughtful and well-spoken. So I'm just looking for the back and forth that we're gonna have this afternoon. And I'm just grateful to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. So you ready for me to go ahead and load the presentation on the screen?
Yes, ma'am. And I think Ariane's gonna start everyone up.
Okay. Can you see the presentation on the screen?
No, not yet. Not yet.
Okay. Is it up yet?
Not yet.
Let's see what's going on. Uh-oh.
I have mine up. Do you want me to check to see if I can put it up?
Try it, Damon. See. Let me check the. I'll try the
Okay.
options, and I will allow you to share.
Okay.
All right. Here we go.
Okay. Perfect.
All right. Let me see. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, I
Yes.
can see it, Jamie.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, Ariane, go ahead.
Okay. Again, good afternoon, everybody. Thank y'all for taking the time out today to join us. We definitely appreciate it. I know there's many of you who, sadly, some of these incidents have affected, directly and indirectly. And so it may be a little difficult to go through this, but we have to go through the difficult to get to the right. So I definitely appreciate it. One quick thing in housekeeping. These venues and presentations, before 2020 were usually done in person. And so it's a little easier to navigate questions and answers and responses amongst people. But, currently, hey, we're still keeping in touch, and we're keeping in touch through technology, and that's great, and that's wonderful. So I do want to know when people are joining, and we're going to have questions in between the slides, and I'm going to do my best to kind of get to people, for answers and responses. But please be patient. If I can't get to everyone, we're going to have a question and answer at the end of the presentation. So If I'm not, I may not be able to get to everyone who wants to reach out in between the slides to answer questions, but I will be able to get to you, at least get to more of you at the end of the presentation with the questions and answers and responses. So, please be patient. All right. Start. The name of our presentation is The Killing of Walter Wallace and the Aftermath. And it's an examination and discussion of a Philadelphia tragedy by Ariane Bethier and Damon Green. Next slide. All right. Here's a video that I'm gonna ask y'all to briefly listen to so we can get some of your thoughts, perspective on this matter. So I'll turn up your speakers to listen.
Live outside Southwest Detectives in West Philadelphia. George, you've been covering that neighborhood for 2 days now. Still a very sensitive situation, lots of raw emotion on display.
That's right, Brian. Emotions understandably still running high in these neighborhoods. Many of the West Philadelphia businesses still boarded up, some closed, some cleaning up. Behind me, you can see the police district still barricaded. Now, so far, the family of Walter Wallace Jr. remaining quiet this afternoon. Catherine Wallace quickly exiting her home today, staying quiet before driving off. The mother of Walter Wallace Jr. understandably solemn after an emotional 48 hours. Witnessing her son being shot and killed by police, then addressing the media and attending community gatherings as unrest unfolded in the city. Wednesday, a small assortment of candles and balloons were nestled in a corner of 61st and Locust, just feet from the Wallace family home.
I'm here for humanity.
Northeast Philadelphia resident Bunny Figueroa stopping by to pay her respects, shedding tears as she lit candles.
He shouldn't have died. He should not have been shot to death.
Around West Philadelphia, signs of peaceful protests remain as cleanup following unrest continues. Walter Wallace's name can be seen on boarded up storefronts. On the other hand, so can signs of unrelated looting and destruction that's infuriating people that call this home.
These stores, like I shop at these stores every day, and now I can't shop these stores because they're down. They're destroyed.
It's not an accurate representation, but an accurate representation on how the whole community feels is we are angered, raged, disgraced.
As has been the case in many of these circumstances, the community is again calling for meaningful police reform.
The conditions cause the conditions. If the cops not raised around here, they don't know us, they have a natural fear, they're hyper aggressive. It's no longer policing the community. It's no longer.
And as we've seen over the last 2 days, there are members of the community that are working to keep the peace. We will undoubtedly see much of the same tonight. For now, we are live outside Southwest Detectives. George Solis, Channel 6, Action News. Jeanette.
Okay, George, thank you.
So audience, after viewing that quick snippet or segment of a news report on this matter, what are some of your thoughts about the comments made by members of the community about the Walter Wallace Jr. shooting incident?
I'll go ahead and kick us off until we have a next commenter. This is Tamika speaking. And so my thoughts are that we've seen this tape before. We've seen this video happen in so many different communities. We had a similar incident happen maybe about a month or so in the city of Lancaster, right before Mr. Wallace was shot and killed. A young man by the name of, I believe his name was Oscar Muniz, and he was in the middle of a mental health crisis, and the family called for a crisis intervention to respond, and I guess that they didn't, the resources weren't available, and the police got the call. Now, the officer that was on duty, he was attempting to respond, and Mr. Muniz came out, and in the throes of a mental health crisis, he was very menacing, and I struggle with the use of language, and I try to be careful of my words because I'm always conscious of the implication of words. So when I say things like menacing, but that's what it was. If you see a person running at you in a full-blown rage, with a knife, it felt menacing. And so I'm a daughter of a police officer. And so as the officer also wants to get home. For the most part, I believe that most officers don't want to have to hurt anybody, but at the same time, they don't come to work to be hurt either. And that officer should not have had to been subjected to a knife attack. And so he shot Mr. Muniz and he ended up dying. And it's double-edged when we're talking about mental health. I believe that officers should be better versed in mental health. I believe that resources should be available to address mental health. But at the same time, when cops are called to a violent situation where even the family themselves were fearful for their lives, it becomes a question of, so what should the officers do? How should they handle it? So it's difficult, but I think that the community and the police department should be addressing mental health and dealing with this. And what I know is that the difference being that when there are other people who have mental health who do not live in Black and brown bodies, they are handled more gingerly. That I will say. I'm gonna go back on mute and take my video off.
Tamika, is there a comment in the chat? I think I've seen Kimberly make a comment.
Yes, there is. I'm going to come to Ronessa first, Ronessa, and then I'm going to come to Kimberly. Okay. Rothwell, you can just both unmute yourself and put your video on, because I had just the gentleman on video so that we could just focus on you. Come on, Ronessa.
Hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So one of my thoughts was that the gentleman that was commented and said that what's going on with the looting and everything is just a symptom and an indication of how the community feels, that they're tired and we're fed up and burnt out and disgraced. I'm not sure about the particulars of what this shooting was about. I do know that they did not have to shoot him so many times, and that they should have been more equipped to handle a mental health crisis if that is what the initial call was. But I do know that it's come, this isn't the first, the second, or the 20th time. And so that in itself is where the fatigue comes in at, is where the rage comes in. And it's like the police have a license to kill. And I empathize, well, no, I'll say I sympathize with people who have family members who are police officers. I don't, but I do have family in law enforcement. But it doesn't make me feel that I understand their position anymore, because I feel like they should be equipped, and whether that is more training or not, we would have to look into that. But there is inherently people who go to the police force to kill Black people. That's how I feel about that. And I think that they know that they can get away with it by wearing the blue. They have that even those police officers who are admirable, and it disgraces them. So I think that, you know, my thoughts on what the comments are, some people are brainwashed into thinking, oh yeah, let's talk about the looting and the symptoms, when that's not what the conversation should be about. The conversation should be about, what are we going to do to change these law enforcement officers who are paid by our tax dollars to protect us, and they're legally killing us. And also, let's look at how there are white individuals who are taken down safely, who have killed innocent people in churches with AK-47s on their back. They've found a way to disarm them. They found a way to disengage them. Why is not the same strength and the same skill used when it comes to Black and brown folks? So those are my thoughts on
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
To make a statement, Peter Chin.
Okay.
Yes. Hi. Am I on the video? You hear me?
Peter.
Go ahead, enable your video, Mr. Chin.
Okay, so I hear everybody is very upset. The videos. That was a very tragic incident, and the alternatives are old school from New York, retired. I'm from New York, retired from the police department. There's a lot of missing steps in this Wallace situation. The police responded too fast, because when we have the 911 operators dispatching that this is a repeat incident, domestic issue numerous times. So the thing is, the first responding officer gets there, they got to wait for supervision to respond and have supervisors make a decision. When the first patrol officer gets there and the supervisor, sergeant or lieutenant or captain gets there, he will make a proper assessment and he will say, well, this is a domestic situation. We need emergency services. So those are the persons that has the nets, the tasers and the full equipment, chemical. And if that all three together collectively try to solve the situation instead of the first responding officer taking all the actions and then having no other choice but to resort to the most highest form of serious or deadly physical force, that's what we're going to get. So there was a lot of steps missed, and this is from all stuff I learned from 20 years ago. I don't see this action procedure in the Philadelphia Police Department. That's a shame there. I'm sorry. I don't want to downgrade my fellow officers, but that seems to be a pattern. A lot of the officers respond by themselves, acting on their own, and they need a backup. They need more supervisory, criticism and control of the situation. I hope everybody agrees.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Peter, you make some excellent thoughts there, and we are going to address that later on in the presentation because it's a very complex issue, So, Ariana, are you ready to move forward?
No, I think we got a short.
We got some more in the chat. We've got some more in the chat.
Kimberly.
So Kimberly said that she agreed with Ronessa, and she also said, well said, Peter. Kimberly, would you like to come on and make some additional comments? And after Kimberly, we can go to Sabrina, because Sabrina had some comments.
Actually, I feel like at this point, I don't really have to say much because what Peter and Ronessa said, pretty much encapsulates my feelings and any other comments that I have about this question. But
okay.
Thank
you, Kim.
Yeah. So after Sabrina, then we'll move on to the next slide. After Sabrina makes her comment, we'll move on to the next slide.
Okay, I guess I'll just make my comment because I can't see where I can open the video back up. Pretty much, I do agree with everyone, but I also, as I said, I also know that police are trained to shoot to kill. And that's one of the issues. They need to stop training them to shoot to kill and teach them better how to deal with people with mental health issues. Or even for instance, if you can't train all of the police, perhaps someone in each district, put someone there who knows how to handle it, and they're the ones who are called in those instances.
That's a great point.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Damon, move to the next slide.
So what have you learned so far? Well, in regards of the incident, well, what we have learned so far is that the first 911 call made to police dispatch happened at 3:42 in the afternoon. And it was made by a neighbor stating that the people next door are fighting. Somebody asked me to call the cops right away. And the location was at 61st and Locust Street out in West Philadelphia. Just seconds later, Walter Wallace Jr.'s sister calls 911 for a second time. And so when she called for a second time, her reports, she stated that they called the cops earlier and the cops is not doing nothing. She reported that Walter had no weapons, was on probation, and had a criminal record, and that her father felt faint, her mother's blood pressure was high, and her parents were screaming. Then following that second call was the third call, just a minute later, where an unidentifiable man had called 911, screaming that can be heard in the background, stating that my mom needs help, please report to 6124 Locust Street. So, body cam footage presents to us that just 41 seconds passed between the time the officers arrived on the scene and before Walter Wallace Jr. had lost his life due to him suffering from a mental breakdown. Both of the officers were fairly new to the force. First officer, Officer Muntz, was on the force for 3 years, and Officer Matarazzo was just on the force since 2018, both assigned to the 18th District in West Philly. A total of 14 shots were fired by the officers. We also know that Walter had a history of mental illness and had previous contacts with the criminal justice system. Now, in the reports, it is unclear if Walter's family ever requested an ambulance or even stated that he was suffering from mental illness when the 911 calls were made. And it also must be noted that the responding officers were not equipped and they were not trained on the use of less lethal force, such as tasers. So the question remains, since Walter Wallace's Jr. sister indicated in her call that Walter had a criminal record and was on probation, do you think this action aided in creating a possible negative prejudgment in the police interaction with Walter when they arrived on the scene? It's the question to the audience.
So we have a comment, we have another view here. This is from Saul Ravitch, and Saul says, we've lost the ability to have rational discussions about problems. Whenever a police officer is accused of misconduct, it often becomes difficult to separate out the individual officer from police officers as a group. We're often prone to oversimplification. And give me one moment. I'm just working through this chat here. And also, Todd Schwartz asked the question, can the state issue binding guidelines regarding police reform? And if so, what executive agency would issue the guidelines? So in answer to your question, I do believe, I think that by stating that, hey, he's got a criminal background and he's on probation, that almost sets up the call that he might be dangerous, he might be on. Like there's implications in saying he has a criminal record and he's on probation. Like if I needed the assistance of police, and if ever I would call them to help my family, and I don't know that I would in a situation like this, particularly with a family member who had mental illness, I think that was pretty much the death knell. The minute you said that, that almost gives license to the police to feel as though they are in a situation where their lives are potentially in danger. So I don't think that was wise. So how do we then train the community and family to even interact with dispatch, like with 911? What do you say when you call them?
Well, Tamika, that's an excellent point. If we look at it in a practical way, we have to understand that there's been, unfortunately, a tradition that if you wanted to get quicker response from the police in certain neighborhoods, you needed to say certain prompts. So certain prompts would be man with a gun, man with a weapon. This individual is attacking me, or this person is on probation. You know, these types of prompts elicit a more quicker response when officers are responding to the scene. Yes, it's unfortunate that the family did that. And I also believe that the Walter Wallace Jr.'s sister was not home at the time. She was somewhere else trying to get help for her parents. So it's very important to understand the whole dynamics of everything when it comes to police response in a certain community, and how, unfortunately, when it comes to getting quicker response and services, that type of statement was made. And if we can go back to Saul's statement, which is very important. Yes, we do live in a climate where it's difficult to not prejudge an officer. You know, we have a lot of things going on. We have a great deal of tension on both sides. We have a high level of coverage from the media. And then we also have to think of it historically. From a historical perspective, there has been a deficit of a relationship between police and minority communities. So when that tidal wave comes from an incident, what type of protection does we as a total community have to deal with the tensions that may arise? You know, if you know the history of policing, it's always been about protecting private property and social control.
Yeah.
So since there hasn't been that many reformations since the inception of modern policing in America, you know, on an institutional level, it can be difficult to fight off those types of challenges that our communities face, especially when it comes to police and community relations.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Kimberly Damon. I was wondering, I don't know if Saul can read in the chat, but if he felt comfortable talking more about what he sees that should be done.
With the participants.
All right. Yes, I can read. I just often get discouraged because it seems like there are forces that discourage debate and conversation. And if we have, like, as soon as you say this police officer behaved inappropriately, there are defenders who come forward and say, you know, we have to support all our police officers. And I recall reading online, you know, talking about, you know, labeling all police officers in one as a whole, and the same thing with people who were protesting these the killings of African Americans and minorities. And it is very simple. I support all police officers except those who break the law, and I support all protesters except those who break the law. So the key aspect is those who break the law, but instead of focusing on, you know, individuals taking action and taking responsibility for their actions or being held accountable, you get painted with this broad brush, like, oh, you're trying to, you know, you're criticizing all of law enforcement, and that's the thin blue line that separates us from chaos. And it becomes very difficult to discuss the underlying issues and problems because there are forces at work that just, we as a society, we're not given to nuance, and we just tend to oversimplify everything.
Right, good point. You know, one of the further things is, and this is the reason for this program right here, is oftentimes we're reactionary in our communities. You know, when we can't keep waiting for incidents to happen, shootings, killings, and everything, for us to start getting upset, getting mad, and then advocate, and then it dies down shortly thereafter. You know, the issue is we have an agency such as the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. We're trained to do proactive measures such as education, training. We can do forums and things like that. We, you know, anyone out in the community can call on us and request. And man, hey, listen, we need training. We need some assistance. We can go, if you have the police come to your to a community meeting or something like that, call our agency, have someone contact someone in our agency so we can attempt to set that up. You know, one of the further things is that, you know, often within our communities, you know, we have to, you know, everybody says, oh, well, we know the police is bad, we don't have the proper relationship and so forth and so on. But then all the proactive things no one wants to address, no one wants to take the time to get involved with or even ask the question. And that's kind of why we're presenting this program here today, at least just to start to open the discussion up. Everything's not going to be resolved from this program today. If it was, hey, that'll be absolutely great to end the year and start a new year. But that's not the case. What is we're taking ourselves as people within the Human Relations Commission and persons who work in civil rights, human rights, and just even persons within the community to say this conversation needs to be started and not ended until we actually have some true advocacy and change and to move on, okay? So we're gonna move on to the next slide though, and we're gonna move on to the next slide. Go to the next slide, Damon.
So as we're coming on to that next slide, I want to add to Saul's point though, that same nuance and that kind of benefit of the doubt that officers would like to have, unfortunately, that same nuance and benefit of the doubt is not given to all Black men. So just like police officers don't want to be painted with a broad stroke and they don't all want to be seen as racists who are out to just kill people of color, likewise, all Black men do not want to be perceived as criminal and painted with this broad brushstroke of, well, you probably did something and I'm going to assume that you did and treat you in that way and you're all thugs. And so that same benefit you're requesting for them is not given to other people as well. So what do we do?
I agree. I do believe there's a double standard in place. And I was just commenting on that. I wasn't saying I agree with the technique of painting everybody the same way. I just speaking purely subjectively, as a white man, if it gets so tiresome for me seeing all these stories on the news, I can't imagine what it's like when you see it happening to members of your own community. I mean, it's obviously exponentially worse. And given what Director Lassiter said earlier about fatigue, I just don't see how we move past it. It seems like, it's like the mythical Hydra. You cut off one head and two more grow back. How do you stop it?
Okay, great points, great points. Next slide is racial disparities in the mental health system. Racial disparities or unfair differences within the system of mental health are well documented. Research indicates that compared with people who are white, Black, Indigenous, and other people of color are less likely to have access to mental health services, less likely to seek out services, less likely to receive needed care, more likely to receive poor quality of care, more likely to end services prematurely. Next slide, then.
We also see, when it comes to racial disparities in the mental health system, that Black men are overdiagnosed with schizophrenia almost 4 times more likely than their white counterparts, while also being underdiagnosed for post-traumatic stress disorder and mood disorder. Black, Brown, and Indigenous people are overrepresented in the criminal justice system, where the intersectionality of race and criminality often occurs. Statistics show that over 50% of those incarcerated also have mental health issues and concerns. And as we look even further at that, rather receiving mental illness treatment, Black and Brown people usually end up incarcerated because of these symptoms. And because due to this incarceration, the jails and prisons often have a very poor standard of care in treating these types of individuals.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment on that, sir.
Okay, well, we're gonna allow people to comment. Like I said, some of your comments may have to be saved to the end. We're trying to get through some questions, and definitely keep emoting your comments. As I said in the beginning, in this form, we want to try to get it. We're not, we're going to try to address as many persons as we can.
Yes, sir.
And if after the questions, Tamika, of course, could read any comments made. She can read them during the course of the question time. All right.
So with all that being said, how should mental health crises be handled in the community? Should there be police involvement? How do we deal with individuals who are suffering from a mental health crisis that may be at risk of harming themselves or others?
Okay. Peter, you wanted to make a comment right now?
Yes, so my last job with the Commonwealth was Norristown State Hospital. As you know, that's a hospital where inmates are declared with mental issues, and they're found not guilty by insanity or schizophrenia, as the slide indicated. And this hospital is very helpful to the community, and persons that committed homicides, robberies, could be as harassment, as minor as harassment, but they're declared mentally ill. They go in there, they get the miracle drug, they're on the program, physical activity, they have counseling in there, a lot of educational programs, and it does help. But unfortunately, the hospital is about 100 years old, and it doesn't have so many beds in there. And they get the best medical care, and they come up pretty much back to normal. And we're talking about mental health crisis. It's very expensive. And a lot of times it's covered by federal funds, but we just don't have enough beds. And there's a lot more than several hundred patients in Norristown State Hospital that needs help. And the case of Walter Wallace, we have 7 years of history of the domestic violence, and even the 911 operator stated that there's a long history with this address here, use caution. So, how can we improve mental health? That's where are the funds? And I tell you that it's a shame that the state hospital is not the Hilton Hotel or the Marriott Hotel. Mm-hmm. So, it's very expensive. It's very expensive, but the miracle medications do help, but there's not enough beds. So we need to look into that and see how we can improve mental health to de-escalate person's angers and anger management. And I think like Mr. Lassiter, my boss, was saying, how do we handle all this, improved identities of all this persons who are in trouble, and how to get them out of the trouble there, and that's very important.
Good points, Peter. Thank you for your input. One of the questions in the chat was, how do we handle the stigma associated with seeking help for mental care? Does anybody have any feedback on that? Any pushback?
Well, mental care is something that is positive. It will help a person improve.
But there's a stigma in different communities. I think that's more so what the question was relating to. In different communities, there's a stigma in seeking help for mental health.
Yes.
Before we even get to this point.
Like in the hospital, it was mandated by a judge. So they go in there, they have that stigma, and but they come out a better person.
Okay. May I chime in? Start talking about it as a community to destigmatize it. Like we see, we have some famous people coming out and speaking about mental health and the importance of seeking treatment. But therapy is not just a crystals and she kind of thing. A lot of times people can't afford mental health care, but even where the resources are free and they're available, because we come from a community of, well, don't talk about what goes on in my house. What happens behind my door stays behind closed doors. We don't put our business out on Front Street, as we say. So even through conversations like this, so whether you're in the barbershop with your boys, whether you're sitting at home in your family and you have an undiagnosed bipolar sitting at Thanksgiving, family needs to start talking about it and calling a thing and saying, you know what, I think you need treatment. And you wouldn't let diabetes go untreated. You wouldn't let heart disease or alcoholism go untreated. So it's the same thing with mental health. It's okay to seek treatment.
I also think that as mental health professionals, we need to do a better job with regaining the trust with the Black and Brown community, because I'm in school right now, and I know that just the relationship with therapists and the over diagnosing mental health of our children is an issue, and it causes people to not have trust. We have that issue now, even with the COVID vaccine. We don't trust it. I don't trust it, and I don't blame anyone for not trusting it. So I think the mental health professionals need to do a better job as well. And I must say, being a student, that is happening. We are talking about it. We're learning about how to reach out and bridge that gap. So I just wanted to say that.
Great point. Thank you. Tamika, before we move on to the next slide, is there any other comment in the chat? We can get to like one more comment.
So Sabrina poses to Peter. She says, Peter, will additional facilities help? The chat is moving. She says they closed so many of those decades ago. So I guess the question is, how are beds? Do beds alone help?
Oh, the minimum beds help the most serious patients there, but there's not enough beds, and there's always a lawsuit to expand mental hospitals, but the resources are not there. And like Norristown State Hospital is about 100 years old, and they're not operating like the Hilton Hotel, the Marriott. So they're getting the minimum medications, therapy programs, doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, the minimum. And there's only several hundred beds, and then there's many more in our community that needs this assistance, and that program is perfect. They come out very nice. Their lives do get better.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Damon, move to the next slide, please.
And so, as we stated before, per media reports and the testimony from the family, Walter had a history of mental illness. So the other question that arises from this incident is that should this information have been initially asked by police dispatch personnel before any police responders were sent to respond?
Can I make a comment on that?
Sure, Peter.
Well, okay, there's standard protocol. Officers have to know what are they gonna be responding to. Is this just a little push and shove, or if this is a violent incident? If it's violent, then officers have to be prepared to protect others and themselves. And like I said before, the problem is here, the 911 dispatcher did state that use caution, ongoing, radio, 61st and Locust. Right there, the first responding officer team, the first patrol car needs to get there and report on the radio. I need the supervisor because this is a serious incident. Supervisor comes on the scene. He's in control. Yes, we do have a confirmed man is, let's give him a chance to calm down, see if he can just catch his breath. Let's call emergency services. All those steps are missed in this situation. The officer just responded, and then the back was against the perpetrator with the knife swinging around. It's too late. That's the fix here. We solved this problem right there, and I don't see that. This is in New York State, New York City, 20 years ago, and we wait for backup. We don't go in there and be like a John Wayne and try to solve one-on-one, two-on-one. And that's gonna cause problem. There's negotiations, hostage negotiations. There's all kind of teams that can come in first before this action takes place. Now, whatever did happen, because it's one-on-one, because the person had a knife, it was unfortunately seemed to be justifiable still in the investigation. But those steps should have took a step back, and I would have solved the whole thing. This committee here wouldn't be here if that would have happened.
Thank you, Peter, for that.
Welcome.
And that's one of the things we're going to discuss further.
Please.
What are some of the structural things within the police that we can deal with, or that can be adjusted, or reimagined, or reconstructed in order to help? Because anytime we hear someone speaking, about the police on behalf of the police, they always talk about procedures and protocol are in place. But however, from the time of the procedures and protocol to the time of actually supposedly implementing those procedures and protocol, something goes awry. Something goes awry where someone ends up hurt or dead. And it's usually a person of color, and specifically a African-American male. So at the end of the day, we're trying to just, what can we do to be bridging the gap so that we can get these procedures, these ideal procedures that are supposed to be in place to the actual implementation, so we can stop having so many deaths. I mean, no death is I don't feel, any death by, an accidental or, intentional, caused by police or anyone is a terrible situation. But we consistently, as someone spoke earlier, we're consistently only seeing these things with African Americans, especially African American males. So it's hard to even take that out, out of the picture. People say, hey, well, more Caucasian persons across the country actually die of police violence. Well, because people say, hey, it's 4 to 5 times more Caucasians than is African Americans. That's not a justification. That's still not a justification to say that it happens to others. So then, okay, if it happens to you, we shouldn't be all up in arms about race. And that's kind of what we're trying to deal with and kind of trying to address. But does anybody else have any further comments?
Yes, if I may.
Yes.
Commissioner Ramsey allocated tasers for all units for every district, and West District did not have any tasers, nor did they have any training.
Right.
When the Kenney administration came on, that budget was slashed, or the grant money was not spent. I would like to know, and I don't think it's been discussed, as to why that money wasn't spent, as to why they weren't armed with tasers, but I hope there's some public accountability, and I hope we find the answers to that.
Okay. Damon, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, Todd brings up some great points. That's actually our next discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Question. Does policing need to be reformed or reimagined? That's a question for the audience. Policing, and that's a question for the audience and for you to think of as I read on to these next slides to talk about it, because that's what we're going through now. Is it just some kinks that we need to work out, or does it really need to be completely eradicated and bring in a whole new structure to address the issues that are currently going on in today's society? Damon, go to the next slide.
And Arian, just to buttress that point, you bring up a great point, because researchers and scholars, some individuals believe that the criminal justice system is working the way that it was always intended to work.
Exactly.
And so in order to actually change things, public safety has to be reimagined.
Exactly.
Policing was initially about social control. Down south, it was the slave patrols for enslaved Africans. And up north, it came from the night watchman. And the night watchman would protect the property of the colonial business elites. And they will also socially control the wave of immigration that was happening at that time.
Okay.
So, that's something that we really need to think about, whether we want reforms or whether we want a reimagining of public safety.
No, it's a great point. Policing, this slide is policing in Philadelphia, reforms deferred. In 2013, in response to an increase in officer-involved shootings, then Philadelphia Police Charles Ramsey reconstructed technical assistance from the Justice Department's COPS office. This is a little bit in regards to what you were speaking of earlier. Next point, launched in November 2013, the Collaborative Reform Initiative in Philadelphia focused on the use of deadly force over a 7-year period. On March 23, 2015, the Department of Justice released its report on the Philadelphia Police Department's use of deadly force policy. 48 findings and 91 recommendations to implement best practices at the Philadelphia Police Department were presented. The Department of Justice report and its recommendations were ignored by the police administration. Next slide then. Report found the Philadelphia police officers did not receive the sufficient training required to de-escalate potential violent confrontations. Next point. The DOJ recommended regular and consistent training in the department's deadly force policy and the ECWs, which are electronic control weapons, be standard issue weapons for every officer. About 4,500 uniformed patrol officers make up Philadelphia's police force, and the department has 2,300 tasers as reported by Commissioner Outlaw. Not every officer in the city is equipped with tasers who would be equipped with tasers. Not every officers who would be equipped with tasers include lieutenants, sergeants, and uniformed patrol officers. PPD gets $900,000 a year for electronic control weapons, enough to buy a few hundred per year. 95% of the police budget goes to the personal cuts. See, this talks about with Todd, Peter, and a few of other persons speaking about, we have protocols, we have resources involved, but for some reason, the protocol and resources are not getting implemented when it comes to African Americans and that people of color in general overall, but African Americans specifically seem to be getting the brunt of, be on the brunt end of these negative interactions with police, which result in some type of bodily harm or death, finality. So, the point where we're trying to address as an agency, and this is what we're going to further go into later in the program, is what can our part be as a commission? And not only what can we demand of ourselves, but what can people who we serve in the community demand? Now, that's going to take a part of, they have to be there to help. It's kind of like us as investigators. We talk to people and say, hey, you can help investigate your case. What evidence you have, what witnesses and things like that. So it has to be a back and forth between not just, an advocating agency such as ours, but the citizens that we out here trying to advocate for and help serve and protect in some capacity. So go to the next slide, Damon, please. Okay. Policing in Philadelphia, perspective reforms introduced. Point 1, Philadelphia City Council was funded the first year $4.5 million of a 5-year plan to get more tasers. Next point, all officers will undergo a de-escalation training and crisis intervention by the fall of 2021 per Commissioner Outlaw. Next point, the police department will also implement a decision tree or a set of questions geared to helping others identify those in crisis if they don't offer that information voluntarily. Next point, the police department will also work more closely with the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services to train officers on responding to mental health crises. Next point, Philadelphia voters approved a ballot measure giving City Council the authority to create the Citizens Police Oversight Commission. So this goes more so to a question that was asked earlier about what are some other forms or structure that can be helped to kind of aid in the situation and addressing these interactions with the police and the citizen. Tamika, are there any comments in the chat section?
I think I'd like to make a comment if permitted.
Who's speaking?
Okay. That's Peter. And yes.
Peter, if you just hold on one moment, I want to see if we have some other comments from someone who maybe has not had a chance to speak yet. I'll come right back to you. Right. So we have Nicole Wilson. Yes. Nicole Wilson Gonsalves says, unfortunately, they have all these resources and protocols, yet when they are not followed, no one is reprimanded. And that has been a sentiment that has been shared throughout the chat here. Sabrina notes that now they have 2,300 tasers. And Ranessa adds, in her opinion, she says, in my opinion, yes, Albert, in response to Albert Black's question, are the police being asked to handle issues that would be better handled by others? And Ranessa says, in her opinion, yes. The mental hospitals closed and the private prisons were opened. Either the issues would be better handled by other professionals or in conjunction with other professionals. Mm-hmm. So that's what's going on in the chat. And we're having a lot of agreement one to another. Like as people are bringing up different points, staff are chiming in and agreeing. There's a question about money and resources. And Sabrina says she doesn't think it's just money. She agrees that money may stop some people, but there's others who are too concerned about their image and that they can't be seen going to a psychiatrist. On a TV show, she said she recalls someone saying, Black people don't go to psychiatrists, we go to church. And that's a whole other fallacy. So
right. That's a whole other, yes, yes it is.
Yep. Before we come back to Peter, y'all, I see that you're on slide 17 of 27. If you can try to get through much of what you have, because I know y'all prepared and y'all have some really good points here. We'll come back to other comments at the end.
No problem, because we'll come back at the end, so people can save their comments. No problem. Next slide. Next slide.
So what we have here, after our discussion of the Walter Wallace incident and what has been going on in our community, the next step in asking ourselves, what role, if any, can the PHRC play as we move forward? So as we mentioned earlier, in 2020, not just locally, but also nationally, there has been episodes of racial tension. There has been episodes of shootings and the pandemic, police violence, but there also have been protests and other things that have been going on. And when we look at this, we have to understand that these types of issues do not happen in a vacuum. You know, a lot of issues that happen outside of our city still affects us, whether it's the police shooting of Ahmaud Arbery down in Georgia, or the murder of George Floyd, or even locally having men show with baseball bats and addressing peaceful protesters, or unfortunately, the tear gassing of protesters by our own police department.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We also must note that because this doesn't operate in a vacuum, these racial tensions also lead to other conversations and other issues, where we had the Columbus statue down in Marconi Park in South Philly, or the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting out in Wisconsin, or the Breonna Taylor verdict. Unfortunately, leading up to right before our election, the shooting incident of Walter Wallace Jr. So with all of these events going on, through already a difficult and tumultuous year, we have to ask ourselves, what role can the PHRC help in alleviating some of these issues that our community is facing?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So as Damon and I have been working on this presentation, of course, between him and I, we've discussed some things in regards to what we feel the PHRC's role can be. And we bring in this presentation because not just from here, but from this day forward after this program, whether you're working at the PHRC or whether you're in organizations who can call on PHRC, which is anyone in the city, you start asking yourself, what role would I like to see the PHRC do in advocating and trying to resolve or educate on these issues, and be a really active role player as opposed to a bystander. Our agency throughout history was never developed just to be a bystander. We were developed to be actively engaging into enforcing the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. So for this time now, one of the things that came up is even when our executive director first took his position here a couple of years ago, one of the first things he talked about was having the PHRC engage in social interaction. So when incidences come up, at the time when he first started here, the issue with Starbucks came up. Now, of course, that's a race-related situation, but different in regards to actual impact. But one of the points that was brought up by him is that we should be on the front lines. We should be on that scene of when people are called to address these issues. We need to be on that scene out there saying, well, what's going on? How can we advocate? What can we do to resolve the issue? And what can we do therefore to be a proactive entity in addressing this matter? And so this is what kind of got us to this point here of because although this is different than Starbucks in some capacities, the similar situation matters in regards to prejudgment and not following protocols that are set up by entities and dealing with other persons. So some of the things that we recommended the PHRC can do is PHRC can expand the topics of its virtual and future in-person outreach events, such as the racial disparities of health access and its historical perspective, the history of American policing, how to be anti-racist versus not being racist, the role of media literacy in combating racism, educating the community, and its purpose in the fight for social justice. Next slide, Dan.
So this leads us to the question, how can community and police relations be improved?
Damon and Ariane, are you looking at the group chat answering some of the questions?
Well, I can't see the group
Yeah,
chat.
Tamika's
Yes,
trying to
we see that.
address.
We're going to come to that, Kimberly. We're going to come to
Yeah,
that. I
we're
see
gonna
that
come to
Carl answered your question. They're going to get through the rest of their presentation slides and we'll address that. But Carl Summerson did address your question, Kimberly. Yes.
And so what the PHRC and community relations can do, possibly in the near future, as we try to undertake these endeavors, the PHRC can offer training, subject matter expertise, and assistance to local municipalities in dealing with issues of racial tension and strife. We can also bolster our community efforts and develop a more proactive action plan in dealing with these types of incidents. We can even have a media literacy project to assist in combating racism and other systematic issues. We can also work to implement a operations protocol for handling such things as riots, potential incidents of violence, and issues of racial strife. And we can also work more closely and improve the relationships and the collaboration with our local partners, such as the Philadelphia Community of Human Relations and the DOJ Community Relations Service. So this brings our presentation to a close. Ariane?
Yes, thank you. So here's the time we have, we addressed some other questions that we may want to ask, but and I definitely appreciate it. It seems that the chat is very lively and very interactive, and people are definitely partaking. So I want to go and leave our questions, and Tamika, we can address some of the questions and comments that are made there in the chat, because we want to give those first room to breathe.
So you're coming to chat questions at this time?
Yes.
Okay. So Kimberly Rothwell asked the question, and this is kind of a two-folded question, Kim. You asked, are we still looking at PHRC initiated complaints? And she notes that the PHRA outlines that the governor can give us the authority to look into civil tension issues. Is this still correct, or was that amended or removed from the act? And so Carl Summerson wrote into the chat, Section 7 F2 still permits the PHRC to investigate police force issues when requested by the governor. So that's the caveat on that provision. When requested by the governor, we can look at issues of police brutality or police force issues, but that's technically the only time that we would have jurisdiction over that. And for the most part, our act does not give us jurisdiction over general police activities or arrests or those types of things, unless and until the governor, puts us on that. However, to Ariane's point, what we have been doing proactively and what Chad has been doing during his tenure is we have been increasing our police outreach efforts. And what we've been doing since the time of Ferguson, we've been doing preemptive police presentations and trainings, our diversity, harassment, and respect training that was created about 6 years ago after Ferguson, because police forces, departments were coming to us asking for the training, and there really wasn't one out there. So we created one, and we've begun to go out and do those trainings. And so now, as we are getting more staff, he's hiring more, and there will be more members of our staff who will be going out and implementing that training. And we just received an $85,000 grant from the U.S. Department of Justice that we're going to be conducting trainings within the prison system. It's a partnership with PHRC and the PA Department of Corrections. So in relationship to that, we're going to be going in that area as well. But Kim's asking about two different things. There's PHRC initiated complaints as it relates to other things, and then there's also the governor enabling us to look at those civil tension things, and we can do that. So two different things.
Tamika, Carl put something in the chat saying that we could look He said the PHRC can also investigate with approval of 8 commissioners to look into problems of racial discrimination to avoid and prevent racial tension.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. So all it would take would be the approval of 8 commissioners to look into, I guess, systemic or other racial discrimination issues to avoid and prevent it. So PHRC can act preemptively. We can do that. And that's where having a proactive executive director comes into play. So as these things are brought, or commissioners, as it's brought to the table, if the commission is about it, we can be about it.
And that's why this program was necessary, because just as we can ask the executive director, not just us as staff, but we want to engage people out in the community to say, what can you bring to the executive director? And then he can spar with his team to say what can be done and how can it, how can we move on it? And you have an example right there by what Carl just stated. So this is information that's important for us to know as staff. And so when we talk to people in the community, we can say, hey, these are things that need to advocate or get someone to present to our executive director to present, to move it along the chain to see how we can move on it. Because we have the power. So
I want to also, there's Peter Chin had a question. I'm going to come back to you, Peter. Now, Ariane, you had referenced about the Starbucks issue. And so for people who maybe not be familiar with that incident, it's been roughly about 2 years now. There were 2 young Black men who were at a Starbucks, I believe on 8th Street in Philadelphia, not too far from our regional office. And they were just in there waiting for a colleague to have a business meeting. And they were sitting there and they had not purchased anything yet. Starbucks is a public coffee house and anybody can use. You can use the facilities. And there was nothing that said that you could not use the restroom facilities. And staff members, like one of the baristas that worked there, called the police on these men. And Philadelphia City Police came in and arrested these young men just for being in the Starbucks, sitting and using it for allegedly not purchasing nothing. Like no purchase was required. And there were other people, a white woman who was in there. She said, I've been sitting here for 2 hours. I didn't buy nothing. I'm using the Wi-Fi for free. Nobody called the cops on me. Nobody arrested me. So we're looking at different treatment of folks. And Philadelphia Police Department took a great hit, but for first, initially, the commissioner doubled down on it and was saying that his officers were correct in that, and they were not. And so the department then came to a settlement with those young men, and there was required some education that was involved in that. Starbucks came to a settlement with them. There was some monetary, but the main thing was training for all of their staff. And so institutionally, Starbucks Corporation had some diversity training all around, where unfortunately PHRC, and this is like to my chagrin and to also Executive Director Lassiter's chagrin too, how can I put it? I'm really trying to be careful. We got to be a proactive commission. Like I was kicking and screaming about this, like we should be out there on this. But if you don't have, if everybody is not on board that PHRC is a civil rights agency and should be addressing civil rights issues, we're not going to get to this. And so we're the state agency. We are the top law enforcement agency in Pennsylvania. We got beat to the table by the Philadelphia City Commission. And I'm grateful for them and I appreciate them, but they were all over this and they got contract dollars to do that training, where PHRC, we really have the capacity and we've got the personnel to do that, but we weren't at the table because we weren't taking a proactive stance on that publicly from the top on. And so we learned from that, and we don't want that to happen ever again.
And that's
we issued a joint statement, and I'll tell you because I know I drafted it myself. A joint statement from PHRC, the Governor's Advisory Commission on African American Affairs, and the governor himself. We issued a statement, but beyond that, we as an agency didn't really respond to that, and we learned from that.
And that's I don't want to let somebody else speak, of course. I want to step aside and let other person speak. But that's one of the points that Dame and I were talking about. Like we can't, as a PHRC, we can't just keep saying that because we know we have people. I mean, our executive director is one of those persons who wants. It's not like this is just me and Damon's thought process or whatever. That's why I brought up the incident about Starbucks, because when the executive director first was hired, he was like, this is where he wants to go and this is how he wants us to be out here. So it's not like these things are foreign. And as you said, Tamika, we have people who have the resources, we have people who have the training and the ability to be active parts to do a training, such as an instance like Starbucks. And we can more so, if we don't have, we have a starting point for not necessarily to be trained in the police and their interaction situations as in Mr. Wallace, but then that's maybe something we need to open ourselves up to get trained on how we can be better advocates and be those persons who are called to scenes like this, maybe to be some diffusing, some type of mediation or some capacity in that regard. We need to be that voice because it's really no one else really in the city doing it. I mean, like you mentioned, they call the Philadelphia Commission, but we are the top agency in this state to do this. I mean, the EEOC, they're not there. It could be us. And plus, not only that, it's people in our communities. So we already know our executive director is on board with this. I mean, he's talked about this many things. And as you see, of the many outreach programs he's doing, which has changed over since the years prior to him. So we know that this is a priority for him to address these issues and whatever. So we're just asking other persons within the agency and outside the agency to give us assistance as far as where they need for us to go and where can we go.
If I can just ask one more question, Tamika, because it's been some time. And now with COVID, I don't really know the procedures, but for community advocates, whether they're listening now or whether they'll be watching or hearing this recording later, if they wanted to petition, let's say, 8 commissioners from our agency to initiate something, are there virtual general public sessions of the commission meetings currently being held? So they can bring these issues in a legislative way to those who will be more inclined to be persuaded to do something later?
Yes, we are still holding our monthly commission meetings. They are done virtually. Carl, can you come off of mute and speak to this? There's always the Sunshine Act requires that we publish our meetings publicly. So it's out there because we're in COVID now. I don't know that people are quite as aware of our operations, but that our commission is still meeting monthly and that is still going on. Carl, you want to chime in there?
Laura would better able to say how the public is informed of the public meetings of the commission. I don't know. I know that is something that needs to be done. I would wish I knew how they knew what numbers to call in and on the to be able to get in, participate in the public meeting. I just don't know. They're certainly able to. Laura?
Okay. Yeah, this is Laura. Through the Sunshine Laws, there is a state website where we submit the meeting time and then they put it out to the newspapers. So it is definitely printed in different newsletters in the area or newspapers in the area. And then we can do more as far as getting the word out through social media and those things. But I think what happens is people who are already plugged in are the only ones that are really seeing it. The challenge, I think, is to get it out, to the broader public. But right now, those are the only thing that we're really doing as far as the public, from my understanding, is putting it out in the Sunshine Law. And then if there, I think before, and Carl, you can chime in on this too, when we were going out to different locations, we were engaging people from that area, and hopefully that will start up again when we can.
I'm just thinking of how individuals know what Skype numbers to call to participate in the public session of the PHRC. I just don't know.
Yeah, those are listed. They are listed in the Sunshine Law, but that's right now, that's really the only way, unless, I can certainly start to broadcast that more through social media.
Is that something that can be broadcast on our social media pages?
I believe so. I mean, now? Yeah, because we are, we're obligated to let the public know. So I don't see any problem with doing that.
Okay. Yeah, I think that'll be helpful too in transitioning. Like Laura, if we can have more of an update as PHRC representatives, as Kim just said, what things could be broadcast so we can explain. so we can communicate and pass this on to people in our community and organizations. People are always constantly asking many of us. I mean, that's why this program was necessary, because people are always constantly asking us in our communities, what can we do? How can we advocate or whatever? And so I think that constant re-education, even for us as investigators, will be very helpful.
That's good to know. I think we all, right now, it seems like a moment of change where we are working more towards that. Let me see. I'd like to be able to have you see me while no, I can't. Sorry, I was going to say, I noticed two things that have come up in a lot of the meetings that I've had. One is the word proactive. There seems to be quite a movement around the agency for everybody realizing that our strength is being proactive. So I think that the more, the other word is education. I think the more that we can get out there and do the outreach, train people where we can actually make a difference, as opposed to being reactive after something happens.
Right, exactly.
I think if we can focus our areas, or focus our energies in that area, we are going to have a greater impact. So certainly if you are seeing something that you think we need to get out in front of, like right now I'm working with Director Garcia on the eviction moratorium lifting and what's going to happen with that. If there's something that you feel is brewing, or just that you're hearing a lot of grumbling about, we can certainly try to get out in front of it in whatever ways we can. And send me things when you see them that I can post on social media. I'd like to really start to build up that presence more, because that is a direct conversation, where people can react. And unfortunately, it's been a lot of negative things, just because of the past. But I think if we start to put some proactive things out there too, where people can come and look to us as a resource, then that's going to go a long way, with the positive energy.
No, thanks a lot, Laura, for that. Thanks a lot.
We have a question from Sandra. She asked, it's coming to that. She says she would like to know specifically how PHRC will assist when responding to an incident such as Mr. Douglas's.
Mr. Douglas or Mr. Wallace?
Sandra, who is Mr. Doug? What incident are you talking about? You talking about Mr. Wallace? Walter Wallace?
Yes, the recent incident with Douglas Wallace. Yes.
Walter Wallace.
Yes, that's the recent incident with the taser, where everyone was saying that there should have been a taser that was on location. And I just would like to know, as a prior police commander, I would like to know how PHRC would assist, because you also stated that there is no entity in the city of Philadelphia. There is no organization, in the city of Philadelphia that responds to those type of incidents, but there is. You have the mobile emergency team that works directly for the Office of Mental Health. I used to work with that team, and they respond to all barricades, hostage situations, and mental health situations within the city of Philadelphia.
Okay, Sandra, I can answer that question. I think you misunderstood me when I said that there was no entity that responds to that. That wasn't what we were talking about. So PHRC,
you didn't say that. I thought that that's what Arian said, that PHRC needs to respond because they didn't have anything like that. That's what I thought that he said.
No, okay.
That was what he meant.
Yeah, that's not what I meant. What I meant is that as an investigatory and agency, and we enforce the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, as for citizens out there, before it even gets to the point of the violence and such, we can investigate and address the civil unrest and civil tensions issues. That's where our jurisdiction would be. And it doesn't have to just come from a person filing a complaint. It can come from us being out there. What I'm asking for is for the PHRC to be out there on the ground when these incidents happen, so we're faced there on the ground, even for possible resolution, dispute, or even reporting, so that we can get more information for these future complaints that'll be filed, and then we have to investigate and try to seek some type of resolution for. So that's what I was speaking. We're not a face out there. I can't conclude there aren't any other persons out there, but as the top agency within the state investigating these matters, I know we're not out there. That's the point that I was making.
Right. And so we wouldn't respond to an incident like this because we don't, like, that's not our jurisdictional area. We don't have the expertise or capacity to respond to these mental health issues because, like, like I said, we're an administrative, investigative agency. We're a law enforcement agency, but we do administrative investigation. So that's kind of not our particular area. But what the act does allow us to do is look at incidents of civil tension, and if the governor does request that of us, we can look into incidents of police brutality.
And that's what Carl pointed. Carl pointed that out. Exactly, Tamika. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I do
clear.
understand that. I have extensive background training in EEOC as a commander, so I totally understand what your position is, and I do appreciate that. It makes a lot of sense in what you're saying, Arian and Tamika.
Thank you.
It makes a lot of sense, and that's the only thing I wanted to know, because they're stating that social workers and different people should respond to these incidents. But I would just like to know, a social worker on the ground with someone with a knife, I just don't see that working out. People keep forgetting that a knife is a deadly weapon. A knife I would rather confront someone with a gun than a knife, because a knife can go through my vest. And they have something called the Tooler drill, where a person with a knife, if my gun is holstered, a person with a knife can get to me in 2.5 seconds from 22 feet away. I have had my officers utilize tasers on people with knives, and they pulled the prongs out and tried to stab us again. So, my issue is, a lot of times people speak from a sterile environment. And when you're out there and you're confronting it, you do have officers who are racist within the police department. I fought the police department for racism. But every officer, out of 500 officers in a district, you will only find about 5 to 7 officers who are out there doing these things, but that's the only people that the community sees.
No, and I don't disagree with that point. No, I don't disagree with that. I can't speak for everybody else, but I don't feel it's every police officer.
Thank you.
The point that we are addressing, though, is that a large part of these incidents are mainly happening to African Americans.
Absolutely.
So that's the point. Like, I would not say, again, other people could speak on their opinion, but I don't think it's every police officer. But the fact is, in the parts, if you listen to our presentation, we talked about, and hopefully you could speak on this, there have been resources allocated to the Philadelphia police in regards to tasers and electronic weapons. We're trying to see where is the gap, where it's being lost in regards to resources being given to the Philadelphia Police Department, and then these things being utilized in regards to better practices or best practices when they get to our citizens and people of color, particularly African American. I don't know, is that something you could speak on?
Well, like I said, I'm a prior officer, but absolutely I can. Like I stated in the chat, education has nothing to do with it. If you're inbred as a racist, you're going to be a racist. You have racist SEPTA drivers. You come to the job with you. The job doesn't change you. That's you. But there is a blue wall of silence that a lot of people cannot understand. And if you're talking about laws, there are so many laws on the book in the police departments all over the country. They are there for discrimination. You name it, they're there. But they're not being followed. And when they're not followed, the officer who wants to do good is afraid to speak up, because if that officer speaks up, that officer can, and I'm speaking from personal experiences, you respond to a person with a gun and you're responding by yourself because it's crickets on the air, no one will respond with you. Technical is real. So you are afraid to say anything. And this goes all the way up to the police commissioners because they know about the wall of blue silence.
Right.
And they say absolutely nothing.
Exactly.
You are banned.
Exactly.
So that's where we need to come in and start tearing down that wall.
Yes.
And allowing officers, somebody needs to protect the officers who are willing to stand up. And I have said this to Chad for years. I've said it to everybody. When is somebody going to step in and start saying, listen, we want to be here for those officers who, if you can do that, we wouldn't have these problems.
Okay. No, that you know what? That's a great point. You know, I understand that position. You know, if a police officer saying it, like you said, they don't want crickets when they call to a dangerous situation and no one's there to back them up. So then the question is, where does that leave us as community persons who often are defenseless against people with police officers with guns? Like, you know, it seems like we can't hold, no one is being held accountable for that. Even if it's 5 out of the 500, they're not being held accountable for the reasons that you just brought forth. And that's the impasse we're at. And that's kind of what we wanted to open up in this presentation and in this discussion. Because
what you're talking about, Sandra,
is saying police. And when you say police, just like we don't want people to say blacks,
right?
We don't want people to say African Americans because we say, well, that's not all of us.
Right.
The police department feels the same way. So when you say the police, it's like, well, why should I get involved? Because they're talking about me as well. They're
Fair
out there
point.
running women over I'm a black female. I have a black son. Do you think that it's no such thing as stop and frisk? Do you think that I would be in an organization where someone would just stop my child? I'm not going to go along with that.
Right. That's a fair point. That's a fair point.
So when you sit down and you say, people keep saying police, 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 say some police. How about going out and saying, you know what? We're here for the police who want to tell and do the right thing. That's how you can start tearing down brick by brick the wall, because now we're, as police, are going to feel like, you know what, I got somebody that's going to protect me.
Okay, that's a fair point.
What you're speaking to, Sandra, is a culture shift. She's talking about a culture shift the whole way around, and she's talking about looking at these issues comprehensively. Because as we started off our presentation, what we said was that officers have a right to get home to their family, you know, so no officer wants to be subjected to, and I'm trying to be respectful, but a madman or, you know, somebody approaching them menacingly and having to you shouldn't have to get stabbed up through your vest. I understand that. And absolutely, so we're agreeing 100%. And so we had a person, I believe it was Saul, made a point that we want people to look at officers, we want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but then African-American people, conversely, also want to be given that same benefit of the doubt and not to be presumed as criminal all the time when they arrive into the scene. So what we are needing is all of us, like as a society, and that's why it's called police and community relations, because it's not just the work of the police officers, it's also the work of the community. And so we all have to work towards some resolutions of our issues, but ultimately what it comes down to, the police officers they're the arbiters of the law, they're the ones who have the guns in the hands, and so ultimately they are the ones who are they drive this. And so for all of your good officers, you're right, Miss Sandra, they are the ones who need to be saying to their fellow bad officers, listen, knock it off. You're making it bad for all of us. You're putting all of us in jeopardy. Every time, say 5 out of that 1,000 who go out there and act out and be bad actors, you are jeopardizing the other 995 officers who are serving and protecting and wanting to enforce the law properly. And also, what we're looking at is uniform enforcement. And I know that we talk about these things comparatively, but everything is not apples to apples, oranges to oranges all the time. And we don't want to paint all police with a broad brush stroke. But what we have said and what we do know is that systemically across the board, where there are Black and brown people, they are subjected to violence at disproportionately higher rates than the James Holmes, than the Dylan Brooks, than the Dylan Klebos of the world. So they'll be physically armed, like have a gun, like, forgive me, this is oh, I'm sorry. Here's a knife. I got a knife in my hand right now. They'll have a weapon and they'll still be able to get reason with. But let's talk, let's de-escalate. And they bring it down, even though you know that they are a danger to you and everybody else is coming at you. But when we have Black and brown perpetrators or potential perpetrators, they are immediately say, you know what, oh, we're not going to have tolerance for this, and they're neutralized immediately. No, it's not always apples to apples. We can't always say, well, the way they handled it in Colorado is what we did in Philadelphia. It's difficult to compare, but we do know that when there's Black and brown, the presumption of innocence is not always given. And that's
totally agree. I totally agree with that. And I say that because it's a personal incident. In 1987, my brother, there was a group of white men who came in Almy and said that it was nigger night. Short story shorter, yes, this gentleman tried to stab my mother. My brother pushed him out of the way and my brother was stabbed. Donald Murdoch. I get to the 25th district and they told me one day that I was taken out of trainee, a new rookie. That new rookie was Donald Murdoch. He had been found guilty of attempted murder, ethnic intimidation, and he kept trying to get on the police department. He wrote a letter to Commissioner Timoney, and Commissioner Timoney pardoned him. When you have ethnic intimidation, never comes off your record when you are even a juvenile, because once a racist, you're always a racist. He got on the job and he continued to do what he did. So it has nothing to do with education, as someone had put in the chat. You are a racist because you are inbred as a racist. And I totally agree that when you get, you answer a radio call and you have white males who come from the suburbs, they're not used to, Blacks have a tendency to speak with our hands. We may get a little louder. They're calling for backup and an assist because somebody is in the house fighting.
So that's where we come to cultural competency is what the thing is.
That's
so
what
I
I
want to bring it back, and we're going to reel this in because we're going to start to conclude it. But to your point, Sandra, what you're talking about, that record of that's being addressed legislatively right now, and there were several bills that are on the floor of the House right now that have been raised by some of our Philadelphia Democrats and supported by some others, Patty Kim out of Harrisburg and many others who want to address this record of. So when you have a bad actor who has performed poorly on the job before and they write it off and they get fired, or maybe they just quit or they lose their job, resign, and they go to another law enforcement body and get a job, they're looking at putting out a central repository so that when you are found, whether you found guilty or not, you've been a part of these types of incidents, it can be a part of your permanent record that people can find that, so we can prevent these types of activities. Because if a person was convicted of attempted murder and all that, there's no way that a person like that should be back on anybody's law enforcement again. So I want to thank you so much, Sandra, for your
I appreciate that.
I'm going to give that last question. I promised Peter. Peter had a question. Mr. Chen, you weigh in with your question, and then we're going to get ready to wrap up, gentlemen.
I'm just going to make it short since we're on the police topic, that it is a very difficult job to get on in the police department, like in New York. There's psychological services. Even when you get on, there's psychologists that review your disciplinary record. You can be placed on the rubber gun squad where you work, just clerical as a police officer with no gun. So there maybe, I don't know, I believe Philadelphia may have the same thing. That's going to improve the police officers' performance, and we need that because you can't have an officer always going out and beating heads or having too many gun incidents, gun happy, they call that, trigger happy. So I'm not sure about Philadelphia. I hope they use those screening methods, and that will help the relations.
Thank you, Peter. So Ariane and Damon, I just want to say to you both, on behalf of Executive Director Lassiter and our Social Justice Committee, I thank you both so much for the preparation that you brought to this program. This was, in my estimation, by far one of our best lunch and learns. You engaged with our audience and our guests. You were properly prepared. You used multimedia functions, And this was superb, like impeccable. Thank you. Like, kudos to you both. I appreciate you. I'm bursting with pride here, and I can't wait for how we're going to take off with what we have going on. And certainly, please know that the executive director has all intentions to be utilizing you both and many others in this capacity. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm going to give the last word to both of you, Damon, and then I'm going to come to Ariane to close us out.
Okay.
First of all, I would like to thank everyone in attendance this afternoon. This was a very important topic. I also appreciate Executive Director Lassiter's help and assistance with moving this presentation forward, along with Tamika and Laura and Arian and Miss Medley and Renessa and anyone else that had a hand in this presentation today. This is a very important topic, and we're on the cusp of a brand new future at the PHRC. And I just want to wish everyone a happy and safe holiday season. And God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, I want to echo what Damon said. Him and I did enjoy working on this project, and we definitely had a chance to interact and talk and even have some discussion with each other about the options. The main thing we both wanted to bring out of this is, as employees of the PHRC, we know we have a wide range of what we can do. And even for a senior person such as myself, who's been here a while, there's things that may be accessible to us that maybe we haven't, I understand that we may have not tapped in. We have an executive director who wants to go in a different direction as far as more engaging with the community, working in the community and being an advocate in the community, and not just that administrative capacity that Tamika has discussed, because that is where we have been. It's where we've been, it's where we've known to have gone as the PHRC. So even our own selves internally are going to have to be re-educated and reimagine what we can do. And this is the start of what we wanted to bring here, so that we can be questioning as PHRC reps and the people who we serve out in our communities. What role or other role can you take in helping us to address some of these issues? And that doesn't mean we could do everything and be everything, but there's other things that we can do different and do better than we have been in the past. And we have the executive director who said that he wants to engage in doing that. And I definitely applaud him for that. He's spoken to each of us personally, he's spoken to us as a group and talked about us. He's talked about this since he's been here, and he's trying to do things to put in order. So I just ask that each of us take that as this program as the end of the year, saying, okay, we're wrapping up 2020 and we want to start 2021 as what can we do better and what can we do differently to be beyond the administrative organization that we have been for so many years, but open it up, as Tamika said, and use some resources and the skills and the training that people already in our organization have to be out there on the front line. Again, thank everybody for attending and participating. The conversation was really wonderful to have. I've definitely learned some things, and that's what I wanted to do, learn it and start this off. I hope everyone have a happy holidays and start a blessed new year. And we're going to do better and be better and for 2021. And so thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Take care.
All right. Have a good day.